Kairos, Canada.
So the minister got his facts wrong, and $7 million worth of aid for countries, for humanitarian work in foreign countries, was cut as a result of a factual error. Would you be concerned if that was the case?
I think I mentioned to you before that I don't practice providing comments on things where the reporter talking to me is the only source I have for that. Inevitably, some kind of judgment calls will be made, and they'll be based upon the
they should
point
be based
of view
on facts, right?
Well, they should be based upon, inevitably, they will be based upon the point of view that the government has, the policy point of view it has. That's just the way these things will always work.
It's well known that the Harper government doesn't shy away from a political scrap. Perhaps its fierce stand on Israel is not an anomaly, but rather just how it plays the game. Its critics may call it bloody-minded, its supporters call it principled. Whichever it is, this administration sees Middle East policy not as a delicate balancing of different interests, but rather as a highly partisan contest. And it clearly has no interest in the role of referee.
Governments have always felt sort of ill-appreciated in their efforts. But none of them have ever decided on the strength of that we'll just remove that voice altogether. And this government appears to be on that path.
So I grew up here in Scarborough, in this suburb outside of Toronto. This is the first school I ever went to. So the first day of school, I guess I was 5, 6 years old, walking through the front doors for the first time. My sister and I were the only Jewish students in the school, maybe the only Jewish students that ever went to this school. On day one of school, we walked through these doors, and there was a swastika carved right here in the front door. And it stayed there all year. It was carved deep in the wood. The school, I think they wanted to do something about it, but they just didn't know what to do. There was no mystery about who had done it. It was a kid who I mean, he made our lives hell all that year. But the school had no policy. There was no process. There was no procedure. There was no debate in society about anti-Semitism. Finally, my parents pulled us out of school. We learned at home for a few months. 1972.
Fast forward almost 40 years, and you can find the fight against anti-Semitism here, at a gala dinner in Ottawa's Museum of Civilization.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been warned repeatedly, and we've been admonished to take action. I would suggest, if not us, who? If not now, when? Thank you.
With $500,000 of help from the Government of Canada, politicians and experts from around the world have gathered for a conference of the Interparliamentary Coalition for Combating Anti-Semitism. The event features a Nobel Prize winner.
Since 1945, I was not as afraid as I am now.
Canadian cabinet ministers.
We are reminded of the historic roots of this ancient and pernicious hatred. But the signs are all around us.
Even Canada's Prime Minister.
We must be relentless in exposing this new anti-Semitism for what it is.
The conference is clearly designed to have maximum political impact here in Canada. But there's one fact that complicates the narrative being woven. Even those closest to the fight say that anti-Semitism is no mortal threat in Canada today.
There is no wave of anti-Semitism in Canada.
No, absolutely not. No, it's funny. I've heard people who have criticized us saying that we think this, but no, there is absolutely no spike in the kinds of anti-Semitic incidents that I think appall us.
No, I don't think anti-Semitism is a huge problem in Canada. In fact, as I've written, I think Canada is probably the least anti-Semitic country in the entire world, including Israel.
And I thought that this might appear as a kind of psychological disconnect. because what we would be discussing would be global anti-Semitism, but it would be taking place in the Canadian arena, and people would look at it through the Canadian prism and say, you know, why are we doing this?
Critics of the conference and the coalition hosting it think they have the answer to that question.
It can only be seen as some political charade to counter what clearly is a growing sense that Israel needs to be criticized, deserves to be criticized.
If you say criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, then you can argue that there's a problem, because Israel does have a public relations problem in Canada on their hands.
When 1.5 million people are stuck in an open-air prison.
It's true that the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel is gaining support in Canada. In the past 5 years, each Israeli military action has been met with bigger protests than the last. And Israel is watching it all closely. Here's how one senior Israeli diplomat views Canada.
The most important arena in the world for this new campaign, or rather new battlefield, that on one hand have all those who wants to delegitimize Israel, and on the others all those who wants to present it in its full colors.
Jewish organizations embrace the idea that Canada is a key battleground in the fight over Israel's legitimacy.
A country's prime minister is uniquely well placed to observe all of this.
In this context, the Ottawa Conference is another counterattack, and the BDS movement is clearly considered a high-value target, the poster child for the new anti-Semitism.
Well, its substance is as crude as ever. Its method is now more sophisticated. It targets the Jewish people by targeting the Jewish homeland, Israel, as the source of injustice and conflict in the world, and uses perversely the language of human rights to do so.
In 2005, the first Israeli Apartheid Week was held at the University of Toronto.
You have the leading political figures in Israel accepting this situation.
Despite its characterization by critics as a hate fest, the majority of its events are lectures, often low-key, as academic as they are political.
5 years after the call has been made, BDS has become a term that now has global resonance.
This annual campus event has now spread to more than 60 cities worldwide. And more than any other factor, it is the use of the word apartheid in relation to Israel that sparks passionate debate.
You loosely throw the word apartheid around, and then you label every Jew that supports the state of Israel as a racist.
It is essentially a bludgeon used to silence critics of Israeli atrocities and of Western support for them.
That a Jewish state should not exist as a Jewish state, that today, for many Jews, is now the epitome of what is anti-Semitism.
Israel does exist. If you look at any map, Israel is on there. It's actually Palestine that isn't. If you also look at any map today, South Africa is on the map. It's the apartheid that was dismantled.
But if you say that Israel as an apartheid state must be dismantled, then you're getting to the point where you're denying its right to exist, and that part becomes anti-Jewish.
Do you want Israel to disappear?
I think Israel can continue to exist and not implement apartheid policies against the Palestinian people. It's apartheid that we're against.
The fact that verbiage is being used on campus is intimidating and causes an atmosphere of fear on campus.
And it is on campus where the most intense debates are taking place. Some Jewish students say they feel threatened. Meanwhile, some pro-Palestine students say they're facing intimidation from a controversial group that has re-emerged in Canada.
In the one hand, a Torah, in the other hand, strength.
They're quite aggressive. They scream unbelievably racist comments. They have physically attacked our organizers. Their level of violence is escalating.
The JDL was founded by Rabbi Meir Kahane in the 1970s. The political party that bears his name was banned in Israel after one of his followers murdered 29 Palestinians at prayer in Hebron. In the United States, an FBI terrorism report called the JDL a violent extremist organization after its leaders were indicted in a plot to bomb a mosque and assassinate a congressman. In Canada, the group operates openly from this rundown building in North Toronto.